Welcome to the Therapist Burnout Podcast, episode 90. Hey, therapist, welcome back to the program. So, this month I'm talking about practice closure. Also, before I get to talking about an overview of this practice closure series, I think it's going to be helpful to you. So, don't tune out if you are like, I'm not closing my practice, Jen. I don't have a practice, or I'm just starting in therapy. I think there's something for everybody here. And next week, I'm having a guest on that's really not so much related to practice closure, but I think the themes around the life we want to live, which is really the motivation for why I closed my practice, because I was living a life I didn't want to live anymore. And that is the truth. It has led me to help therapists closing their practices, which I thought it wouldn't happen. But I don't have any cherished outcomes about that. So if you want to be in private practice, you love being a therapist, I want you to stay being a therapist. We need therapists. I've always said that. And why I say that, sometimes I jump into therapist spaces and I don't do it anonymously. My name is out there, it's in the streets. Maybe I'll get canceled one day and all this will be over. But I think if you're a therapist or you're a psychologist, you probably have been in some of these forums where people say things and then they walk into all kinds of stuff. So this person posted something. I wish I could pull it up, but I can't, you can't find anything in a Facebook group once you it's like I don't know where the algorithm takes it somewhere to the nether regions. Essentially, they were saying that it's so hard in private practice right now. I think they had a self-pay practice. And it's interesting. I have seen some therapists posting that they are taking insurance again, like they were once a self-pay practice. Now they're going to take some insurance. And I think this therapist was just posting anonymously that they were really overwhelmed, that they were scared, that they don't know how to make this work. And I have so much empathy for that. And most of the therapists on this thread were just saying that, like, I hear you. This is so hard. These are really scary times financially and politically, economically. It's just a hard time to be a therapist right now, period. Like, whatever you're doing, it's a hard time to be a therapist. And this one person chimed in though and was like, I really believe that this is a mindset issue. That if therapists want to charge what they want to charge, they can do that. And, I was like, I think I chimed in and I was like, I think you have that experience, but that person does not have that experience. Not everyone has that experience. And I did try to go private pay practice. And I did get a trickle of private pay clients, but I didn't get enough to sustain a practice. And I think I was just burnt to the ground anyway. If I had started that way, maybe I would have made it work, but it's a lot of marketing. It's not in a skill set that therapists have. And therapists make it work. Some therapists say that they have filled up their private pay practice, it works for them. Great. I am glad for that for you. But that's not an experience of a lot of people. And I think a lot of people are scared to go into private practice. So I think this episode will help you if you're thinking about going into private practice, you are thinking of getting out of private practice, or you're just here to eat some popcorn. So three groups of people I have an episode for you today. But I think this dichotomy of it either has to be private pay or insurance based, or I have to work in agency or I have to work in private practice. We just lose the nuance. And as therapists and mental health providers, we live in nuance. But I think going into being practice ownership, it felt like you had to do it one way. You had to do it how your supervisor did it, or you had to do it how the people on the internet say you're supposed to do it, which wasn't really a thing when I started out in 2013. I don't think there was a lot of people on the internet posting about how to start a practice. So I was looking around and meeting with people and talking with other psychologists about how to do it. And I read a book and I think I just really skimmed past most of the business side of things about how it could work. And that was just, what I was doing because I think our training does not teach us to think about money, about how the practice will sustain us financially. Many things I've talked on this podcast about. So My bold question is private practice a scam? It's something I heard someone podcast on this week, and I love this question, and I'm doing my take on it. I'm going to unpack how we're sold a myth about how it can be freedom and flexibility and financial ease. And I don't think that is the experience of any private pay. Any, there's too many P's again in this episode. When I talked about the podcasting episode of me being a podcaster for 4 years, I think there was too many P's. There's gonna be a lot of P's in private practice. So, we're sold this myth, and when we're coming from agency, when we're coming from places where we're trained to give our all, give 110%, then of course, we think that's how we make a private practice work, right? And so we're socialized and trained to live in systems that deplete us, that take our life force. And that is not every place. I know this. There are many therapists who have great environments, and we need to find more of them for more therapists to be in. 100%. There's nuance there, of course. But I think a lot of therapists have the experience that they feel like their labor is exploited. And many therapists are questioning whether it is truly sustainable and then what it might look like differently. Like if I had to do it all again, and I posted about this many, many times. One of my most popular posts on LinkedIn is I thought private practice was a dream until it took everything from me. And I think we're told that private practice means freedom, and it is. So if we're looking at agency who dictates our schedule, who tells us we have to be here a certain number of hours, we have 30 clinical hours. That was my story. I went into private practice because my agency job told me if you cannot work 32 hours, we do not have a position for you. So I left. So I was gone. That's why I left agency and started a private practice. Many of us start private practices because of this, because we cannot work the agency job anymore. We cannot work those hours because likely most female identifying people that want to have children, not most, some do. A lot of us do. I think the reality is that we're trained to overwork. And we're trained to give and give and give. And so when we start our new system, we're building it off what we learned. And we're trading the agency, the structure for also fear. I was very fearful coming into private practice because it wasn't guaranteed income. I had to figure it out. And some people on in the internet streets will post about, oh, it was so easy, 10 years ago because you could just post on Psychology Today and like all these clients would show up and all of that. What happened, and therapists write about how that's different now. I don't know if that's really the case because I'm not doing therapy work now. But I found rather, um, when private practice became my full-time gig, because it wasn't that way when I started out. So I had a teaching job and then that company went under, but I kept that going. So my private practice was probably during those years, maybe like no more than 15 clients. And then my private practice became my main source of income. And that became more like 20, 25 clients a week. And then, I think we're telling ourselves, well, it's only 20 hours a week. It's not 20 hours a week. There are there's trainings, there's billing if you're doing billing, there's chasing unpaid claims, there's doing notes on weekends. I talked to one therapist one time who spent an excess of 8 hours outside of clinical time doing notes. I think there's more AI hacks for that hear a lot of therapists are utilizing now actually. So I think it can be there can be some more tools for that piece of it, but not for everything by any stretch of the imagination. I think the financial reality is something we don't sit with because we see our clinical hour, right? My clinical hour, I think I averaged in the 130s, possibly. I was primarily insurance based. Towards the end, I became maybe 30 to 40% private pay before I closed, but I still had a high insurance base. So maybe 130 ish was my rate. And that felt good. I'm like, okay, yeah, well, that's not a bad rate if I'm thinking about a rate, but I did not crunch the numbers until very late into my practice years when I was like, this math is not math and I can't continue to do this. And I think I've said this before, but my highest earning year as a trauma therapist who is EMDR certified, a brain injury specialist who had a certification that not many people get. I still hold those. My take home pay was 50K. I could be working in a library for that. I could be working a lot of different places, making that 50K that didn't take the energy from me. And I think if we tie it back to entrepreneurial poverty, Mike Michalowicz coined that term is the illusion that more clients equals more success when it really equals more depletions. I think we under earn because we're afraid to admit that it's not working. Like somehow we'll figure it out one day, or we'll get a private pay practice, or we'll, do groups to make the numbers work. And it's hard to sit with a reality that's not working. And I think third, I'd want to say that there are hidden costs associated with the freedom that comes associated with being a business owner. So I have been a business owner since 2013, since I left that agency job. So 12 years I've had an LLC. I still have an LLC now doing consulting work. And I think the thing that I found difficult is that I didn't have paid time off. I didn't have vacation built in. I didn't have admin support. And I think this was huge. We don't realize what it's like if you're a solo private practice owner to be alone most of your day. And different, I'm thinking of all the different scenarios and different offices I was in. Some were a little more social, but generally, I think that was the thing that I missed. I missed being around people. So I think part of my mix and my work is being with people, like working in a school setting has been great in the fact that I collaborate in my work, that I have team meetings with other people, that it feels like we're working on something together, that we have some kind of social support and social relationships that are part of that. Also, I think the weight of compassion fatigue without the structure of supervision. So when we're fully licensed, we have this experience of I had this experience of having all this support and then suddenly having no support to do my job. I think this segues into it's a system problem, but we blame ourselves often for that failure or not figuring out, or uh, maybe if I could just be this private pay therapist and charge $300 an hour, then and have 20, you know, clients or 15 clients or whatever your full is for you, then I would have made it work. But for me, I had a hard time with that. I really had a hard time. I mean, my private pay rate, I think when I closed was 200, which I felt fine about. And if I would have filled that practice with that amount of clients and kept them, then that probably would have worked. But I found that I didn't have enough to sustain it. So they would cycle in and cycle out. They would come every other week versus every week, which meant I had to find more clients to fill my caseload. And at that time, I just didn't have the capacity. Like my emotional capacity was not there. So my caseload was dwindling and I could not fill it with more clients at that time. And I think that what drives our labor being devalued and the service being devalued is that insurance rates set that, you know, yardstick, so to speak, for what our labor is worth. And for many people in many states, I've heard just horrible rates, 30, $40 for some rates in some states. Mine were, I think, decent for a national average, if you think about rates for Maine, where I'm located. So I think it makes us blame ourselves that you're not efficient enough, that you can't hold enough clients, that you're not marketing enough, that you should have better boundaries with clients. And I think in truth, we're trying to prop up a system that is broken, that demands too much of us for too little in return. And that's what I sat with. The exchange for my labor did not work for me anymore. And I was ready to leave, not my clients, but because I didn't have really anything left to give and I needed more money. That's just what it was. Is it a scam? It's not really a scam, but not intentionally. And I think when I heard this other podcaster talk about, is it a scam? They were more marketing like for private pay practices. And I think with my podcast, I have struggled to sell anything, maybe because I'm a horrible salesperson. That's for first. Because it feels inauthentic for me to say, you need a private pay practice, that's gonna be the answer. Or you need to get a job at the library, that's the answer. Or you need to close your practice. So while I am developing a course on practice closure, I can't tell you if you need to close your practice. That is the truth you have to come up on your own. And so for me to be in alignment with what feels authentic, I don't have an outcome for you on this podcast. I will present information to say maybe private practice is for you. Maybe you should look into setting it up in a way that doesn't burn you out, in a way that sustains you financially. Because I know for some therapists, they love it. They want to do the work. And if that is you, I want you to do it. I want you to hear me say that. But if it's, I do not want to do this career anymore, I cannot do this anymore, I give you permission for that. If you need it, I grant it. I've said that so many times because I think for a lot of therapists, they don't hear it. They hear, oh, well, have you tried? Maybe it's private pay or, maybe it's this or that and the third. And you're drowning. Like we are beyond all of that. So you're burning. So we're not in like, let's do a little pivot. That's what I was trying to do. I was trying to do little pivots, maybe adding a group and again, adding more things to my plate, which I do. This is my personality. Let's just make it harder for myself versus can it be softer? Can I start pulling back? Can I start little experiments? Which is what I recommend to people. Let's don't make drastic decisions. Let's start some small moves and keep making those small moves and those small pivots to figure out what is the right path for you. So, over the next month, I'm going to be talking on practice closure and leaving the field potentially. And what comes next will kind of be some of November. Next week, I'll have a guest that I've had on the podcast before, Melvin Varghese, host of the Selling the Couch podcast, which has developed into this wonderful friendship that I just adore him and his pivots. I'm just seeing people in these spaces pivoting themselves. And it's lovely to see that we have permission to do other things. Even me on this podcast, I've thought through what pivots are coming for me after I reach 100 episodes, which was my goal with this podcast. And I'm thinking about that too. I'm thinking about what I need. And so, what I hope you take out of this is that if you want to close your private practice or you are like, what, maybe I do need to close it. Maybe I do need to think of the next step. To think about, I would just have you reflect as I'm talking about practice closure, as I'm talking about the pivots you need to make, that you need to make a change in your life. And maybe closing your practice is one of those changes that need to happen. That you will just start listening more to yourself, writing things down. And so I think part of me doing this work too has been listening to those nudges and to those hard stops, full body yeses that happen when I want to do something and living my damn life. That is so important. We are more than work. We are more than what we give and what we do. Like you're allowed to be human. You're allowed to enjoy and savor life. And that is the goal for me, for my listeners. So I hope what you'll take out of this series is some permission, maybe some thoughtfulness about if this is a good next step for you. So with this, I would think about what is keeping you right now in private practice? What is hard? Do you like anything about it? If you love it, I want you to think about all the reasons you love it. There are many reasons I loved private practice and why it was hard to leave. I loved my clients. I loved doing EMDR therapy. I became an EMDR clinician in the course of owning my practice. And I loved the change I saw in that modality and little other modalities I would weave in and out of there. I loved working with clients who had brain injuries and seeing them come in from an injury, not knowing what to do and feeling more calm and collected and supported because I knew how to do that work. Not a lot of therapists are trained in the way I was trained. And so it felt like, it felt really hard to not continue to serve that area. Although now I see my work in schools as kind of a continuation, but just a different population now. So I can see the through line in my career, but I couldn't see it then when I left. So I would just have you think of those things. And I do have a new private practice guide coming out. It's going to be your first 30 days to closure. And I've had therapists tell me they have actually closed their practice just from my guides and podcasts. So I feel great with the valuable offer that it is. So if you want to be the first to hear about that, get on the pen pal list. That's where I will share with you bits about the podcast and also just random stuff that I'm talking about with pivots, with burnout, with not self-care, with caring for ourselves. Self-care is a dirty word still to me, but deep care for you and what comes up for me around that as I'm talking through it. I will talk with you next week. We'll have a guest. We'll have Melvin Varghese, which is a dear, dear human to me. And I will talk with you then.